everybody, and welcome to The Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something pretty basic, how we learn.
It really is fundamental.
Yeah, I mean, it's relevant for, well, obviously everyone.
Right. At school, work, even just life in general.
Totally. And for this deep dive, we're going to be looking at this YouTube series, Teaching and Understanding, by Claus Brabrandt.
Oh, I love that series. Yeah, and what's interesting is that right off the bat, he introduces these two learners, Susan and Robert.
Susan and Robert. Okay, paint me a picture. Who are these two?
Well, Susan, she's kind of she's the learner we all wish we were, Just gets it, dives right in, genuinely curious, wants to really understand things on a deeper level.
Okay, I think I get the picture. So Robert's the opposite then.
Well, let's just say Robert's a bit more strategic in his approach.
You mean lazy?
He's figured out how to get by, let's just say.
So is that it then? Are we just born as good or bad learners? That's the question Brabrandt really wants us to think about. He contrasts Susan's deep learning with Robert's surface learning.
Okay, but what's the difference, really? We all learn, right?
Well, yeah, but it's how they go about it. I mean, Brabrandt says, and he's pretty blunt about it, that Susan spontaneously uses higher cognitive processes, while Robert will cut any corner.
So he's not saying that Robert's a bad guy, just a different approach.
Exactly. It's all about the motivation, right? Susan really wants to understand, while Robert, well, he's more focused on the end goal, checking the boxes.
Like getting that degree. Okay, so two different learners, but where does that lead us? What's the takeaway?
Well, Brabrandt takes this to what he calls the problem of scale.
Oh, problem of scale. Sound ominous.
Well, yeah. As universities get bigger and more students enroll, we're starting to see a shift. More Roberts and fewer Susans.
And that's a problem.
Well, think about it. If more people are just learning to check the boxes, what does that mean for society in the long run? I mean, are we setting up a generation that can't think critically or solve, those big complex problems?
Wow. Okay. That is a big question. So whose fault is this? I mean, are students like Robert just lazy? Or are the teachers failing to engage them?
Oh, that's the classic debate.
Oh, yeah.
And Brabrandt brings in John Biggs, this educational psychologist, to break it down.
Okay, so what does John Biggs have to say about this?
Well, he says there are three ways to think about teaching. The first is, and he puts it really simply, blame the students. Some are good learners, some are bad learners. End of story.
But that's a bit oversimplified, don't you think? I mean, come on, there's got to be more to it.
Yeah, exactly. And the second way of thinking is blame the teachers. If students aren't learning, it's because the teacher's not engaging or entertaining enough.
So, that teacher that was all about Susan and dismissed Robert completely.
Exactly. But get this. Brabrandt tells this story about a teacher who was super entertaining, had students laughing, everyone participating, but afterwards, no one actually understood the material.
No way! So even though it was fun, they weren't learning.
One student even said, "Great teacher, man, that guy was good," but then admitted he didn't get any of it.
So you're saying being a fun teacher isn't enough. You need something more to make the learning stick.
Right, and that's where it gets really interesting. Brabrandt brings in this whole new way of thinking. The idea that knowledge is constructed.
Constructed? What does that even mean? Like knowledge is a Lego set we have to build.
It's a great way to think about it. Instead of just pouring information into students' heads, we need to create an environment where they can build their own understanding.
Okay, so what does that look like practically?
Well, he has this awesome example in the video. He shows this silly number system puzzle. It's this grid where the numbers are represented by different positions, and you have to figure out how to read like a series of numbers in this system. And he shows how once you get the pattern, it becomes super easy.
Oh, I see. Like one of those aha moments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how we learn. We connect new information to like frameworks in our minds. We don't just absorb facts passively. We're actively building on what we already know.
Wow. That really changes how I think about learning.
But that's not even the best part. He goes even deeper with this idea of knowledge construction and brings in this thing called the solo taxonomy.
Solo taxonomy. Okay, lay it on me.
It stands for Structure of the Observed Learning Outcome. It's basically a framework that describes 5 levels of understanding, from like basic to super advanced.
All right, I'm ready for this deep dive into the solo taxonomy. Take it away.
Okay, get ready to go from to Eureka.
I love it. I'm really intrigued by this because we all know what it feels like to kind of get something versus truly understanding it. But is there a way to actually measure that?
That's what's so cool about the solo taxonomy. It gives us a like a language to talk about all those different levels of understanding. And it's not just some theory. It really has practical implications for well, how we learn and teach.
Okay, so how does it work?
Well, imagine you're learning something new, like, I don't know, photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis. Okay.
The first level, prestructural, is when you just have no clue. You might know the word photosynthesis, but you couldn't explain it to save your life.
Oh, I've totally been there. Like when you're asked a question in class and your mind just goes blank.
Exactly. Then we go up to unistructural, where you can grasp one thing about the concept.
So you're starting to get it, but just one little piece.
Yeah, like maybe you know the basic inputs and outputs of photosynthesis, but you don't really get how they all work together.
Just a tiny piece of the puzzle, not the whole picture.
Right. And then comes multistructural, where you can identify like several different aspects of the concept, but they're still just separate pieces of information in your mind. You can list facts, but you haven't connected the dots.
Like having all the ingredients for a cake, but not knowing how to bake it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where it starts to get really interesting. At the relational level, you start seeing how all the parts connect. You can make inferences and understand the concept as a whole.
So it's not just memorizing, you're actually thinking critically.
Yes. And finally, we get to the extended abstract level. Now, this is where you can go beyond the information you've been given and start to like form new hypotheses,
Yeah.
even critique existing ideas. Really think outside the box.
Okay, that's where the innovation happens.
Exactly. And what's really key about this whole solo taxonomy is that it highlights the difference between surface understanding at levels 2 and 3 and deep understanding at levels 4 and 5.
Okay, so this solo thing is pretty powerful, but I'm wondering, how can teachers actually use it to encourage deeper learning? I mean, is it just about teaching to those higher levels?
Well, that's a great question. And it leads us to another key concept Begrepen talks about, constructive alignment.
Constructive alignment. Okay, now I'm really lost.
It's actually a pretty simple idea. It means aligning your learning objectives, assessments, and teaching activities. So like you got to be clear about what you want students to learn, how you're going to measure their understanding, and then, design activities that specifically target those skills and help them reach those objectives.
Got it. So it's not just about teaching material, it's about creating like a whole learning ecosystem that leads to deep understanding.
Yes. And what's interesting is that Begrepen points out that when courses are unaligned, students, especially those Roberts, will just focus on passing the test, not really engaging with the material.
Oh, tell me about it. I remember those all-nighters in college, cramming for exams, felt like I forgot everything the next day.
But when a course is aligned, Robert doesn't have a choice but to engage with the material in a way that actually leads to deeper understanding.
Okay, this is making sense. But what does this look like in practice?
Well, tons of possibilities. Like imagine you're teaching a history lesson, say, on the French Revolution. Instead of just lecturing about dates and names, you could have the students debate from like different perspectives or, social classes at the time. Or you could have them create timelines that not only highlight the key events, but also the causes and consequences. Really see those connections.
So you're turning learning into an active process,
Right.
not just passively listening or memorizing.
And when it comes to activities, think about things that, promote collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, like group projects, debates, simulations, stuff that gets those higher level cognitive processes working.
So instead of just telling students about the water cycle, you might have them design and build a model to show the different stages, or even analyze real world data on water usage and come up with their own solutions to conserve water.
You got it.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is that all of these ideas aren't just for the classroom.
Really?
Yeah. They're applicable to any learning situation.
Wow, my mind is blown. I'm starting to think about how I can apply this, to my own life, not just when I'm teaching, but also when I'm the one learning. I mean, maybe I've been selling myself short by just skimming the surface this whole time.
Exactly. It's really empowering to realize that we all have this potential for deep learning. And it's not just about, some innate talent. It's about skills and strategies that we can all learn and develop.
I'm so pumped about this.
Okay.
Okay, but we've been talking a lot about the teacher's role. What about the learner's perspective? What can we do to become more effective learners?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's the perfect time to shift our focus. Let's talk about some strategies we can use to, become more intentional and effective learners. After all, the power to learn deeply is within each of us.
Let's do it. I'm ready to unlock that power. All right, so we've covered a lot about teaching and, understanding, but let's talk about us, the learners. What can we do to become more like those deep diving Susans out there?
You don't have to be born a Susan to be a deep learner. It's all about building that skill set and approaching learning in a certain way.
Okay, so let's say I'm more of a Robert. I like to get by, do the bare minimum. How do I change that mindset? How can I start engaging, like really engaging with the material?
It starts with self-awareness. That's crucial.
So being honest with myself about how I learn.
Exactly. Take a moment, reflect on how you approach things. Are you actually curious about the topic, or are you just trying to, just get that grade, check that box, meet the deadline?
Oof. Yeah, guilty as charged sometimes.
We've all been there. But once you're aware of those patterns, you can start making different choices. Think about that solo taxonomy.
Mm.
How can you move beyond just, memorizing facts and start to analyze, evaluate, create? How can you go from I know this to I understand this?
So instead of cramming dates and names for history, I could try to understand the why behind those events, the causes, the consequences.
Now you're getting it. And
Mhm.
and don't be afraid to play around with different strategies. What works for one person might not work for another. Some people, they learn best by reading, others by listening, and then there are those who got to get hands-on.
That's true. I used to think highlighting everything in a textbook was the best way to study.
Oh yeah.
But then I realized I was just like coloring the pages, not really absorbing the information.
It's so easy to fall into those traps. We think we're studying, but we're not actually, engaging with the material.
Right.
So find what works for you. Summarize key concepts, try explaining them to someone else, or even make diagrams and mind maps.
Make it meaningful,
Mhm.
connect it to something, something I already know or care about.
Exactly. And, don't forget, learning doesn't have to be a solo mission.
Right.
Don't be afraid to ask for help. Reach out to your teachers, classmates, anyone who can offer a new perspective or help with something you're stuck on.
Collaboration is key. Sometimes just talking about it out loud makes it click.
Absolutely. And maybe most importantly, be patient. Deep learning. It takes time, effort. It's not about that instant gratification. It's about building a solid foundation that, you can keep drawing on.
It's like building a house. You
Right.
can't just slap up the walls. Got to have a strong foundation.
Exactly. Learning needs that same kind of attention, that precision.
Yeah.
But, just like a well-built house, that understanding is going to last.
I love that. This has been such an eye-opening
You
conversation.
too.
We went from understanding to understanding how to become better learners. It's like we've unlocked a secret level or something.
And the best part is this isn't a one-time thing. These are skills and insights you can use, well, forever, really.
So to all our listeners out there, we challenge you. Become an active learner. Don't just skim the surface, dive in, ask questions, explore different perspectives, and most importantly, don't ever lose that curiosity.
Remember that feeling when you finally get something that's been totally confusing you?
Eh.
That's the joy of learning, of deep learning, and it's something everyone can experience.
So keep exploring, keep asking why, keep diving deep, and until next time, happy learning, everyone.